There are moments when the greatest cruelty does not come from strangers, but from those we have loved the most. Why does a son humiliate his mother? This question not only tears families apart, but also reveals one of the darkest truths about the human psyche. In this video, we will dive together into the depths of psychoanalysis to understand why these painful dynamics arise. You will discover how unconscious conflicts, cultural conditioning, and the shadow aspects of personality lead to this destructive behavior. In the end, you will not only understand the psychological mechanisms, but also gain a clearer view of the complexity of human bonds. Let us begin with a truth Carl Jung already recognized. What we fight in others is often what we cannot bear in ourselves. When an adult son humiliates his mother, we are not talking about a moment of impatience or temporary frustration. We are talking about a systematic pattern of degradation that is deeply rooted in the unconscious structures of the psyche. This cruelty does not arise from indifference, but from an excess of emotional entanglement that never found a healthy resolution. Jung taught us that the mother in the psyche of the son is not just a person but an archetype. She represents the primal source, the sense of security, but also dependence. When a son attacks his mother, he is not only fighting a single person, but the entire spectrum of his earliest emotional experiences. He is fighting the memory of his own helplessness, his neediness, his original vulnerability. Humiliation becomes the language of an affect that has found no other form of expression. And imagine a child who never learned to name his complex feelings toward his mother becomes an adult who can only express those feelings through destruction. The love that was too overwhelming turns into rage. The gratitude that felt too heavy turns into hatred. The longing for closeness turns into brutal distancing. This dynamic becomes particularly evident in moments when the mother shows weakness, when she ages, when she becomes ill, when she needs help. Then the original roles are reversed. The son, who was once the one in need, suddenly finds himself in a position of power. But instead of meeting this change with compassion, he reacts with unconscious revenge for all those years of dependence. Carl Jung recognized that we often attack what most resembles us, or what reminds us of our own weaknesses. The mother who devoted her entire life to her son becomes a mirror of his own neediness. Her love reminds him that he was once completely dependent on her. Her pride in him confronts him with the fact that his identity is partly built on her devotion. Here lies one of the deepest psychological truths. The humiliation of the mother is often a desperate attempt to rid oneself of emotional guilt. The son tries to create distance through cruelty, a distance that seems emotionally unreachable to him. He believes he can only be truly autonomous if he devalues the source of his original dependence. But this never works. Every attack on the mother is simultaneously an attack on a part of himself. Every humiliation he inflicts on her also humiliates the child within him who once loved this woman unconditionally. This cruelty becomes a vicious cycle in which the son falls deeper into his own emotional wounds. Freud would say that repression is at work here. The son represses the positive feelings toward his mother because they feel too threatening. They threaten his self-image as an independent, strong man. And so what is repressed returns in the form of aggression. The love that is not allowed to exist becomes a drive for destruction. Let us look more closely. When a son humiliates his mother, he often speaks the language of projection. He projects his own weaknesses, fears, and unfulfilled desires onto her. The mother becomes the scapegoat for all his own shortcomings. She is accused of being too clingy, while he himself has not learned to set healthy boundaries. She is portrayed as manipulative, while he cannot honestly express his emotional needs. These projections are often so intense that the son no longer perceives the mother's reality. He sees only the distorted image that reflects his own unconscious conflicts. The living, complex woman disappears behind the shadow of his own inner battles. Jung also taught us that the shadow contains everything we reject in ourselves. When a son systematically humiliates his mother, he is often fighting traits in her that he also carries within himself but cannot accept. Her emotionality is attacked because he fears his own feelings. Her care is mocked because he cannot admit his own longing for connection. The tragedy lies in the fact that these battles maintain a connection that should have long since been transformed. The son who humiliates his mother is paradoxically still emotionally entangled with her. He fights so fiercely against her because he has never truly separated from her on an emotional level. Aggression becomes a perverted form of attachment. Here, another dimension of this dynamic is revealed, the fear of individuation. Jung described individuation as the process through which a person becomes their true self. This process requires separation from the parents, but in a way that honors both sides. The son who humiliates his mother has never completed this separation. He is stuck in a phase of rebellion that actually belongs to adolescence. But this rebellion is not the healthy rebellion of a teenager testing boundaries. It is the bitter rebellion of an adult who never learned to develop autonomy in a mature way. The humiliation of the mother becomes a ritual through which he constantly tries to prove that he is free, when in truth he is trapped in his own unconscious patterns. In this dynamic, the mother becomes a tragic figure. She has often dedicated her entire life to raising and caring for her son, only to experience her devotion being met with contempt. Yet she too is not free from unconscious contributions to this pattern. Sometimes she struggles to let her son go. Sometimes she clings to the role of the mother because she has defined her own identity through it. Jung recognized that in every destructive relationship, both sides unconsciously contribute to maintaining the dynamic. The mother who continually allows herself to be humiliated may be sending unconscious signals that reinforce this treatment. She accepts the role of the victim because she believes it is the only way to preserve a connection with her son. But this acceptance is also an expression of unresolved psychological conflicts. A mother who allows herself to be systematically humiliated may never have learned to recognize her own worth independently of her role as a mother. She sacrifices her dignity because she believes that love requires sacrifice. She confuses self-abandonment with devotion, but the truth is that this kind of sacrifice does not help the son. On the contrary, it deepens his contempt because it shows him that he has power over her. A person who does not respect themselves will struggle to earn the respect of others. The mother who sets no boundaries raises her son to abuse this lack of boundaries. Here, the complexity of the human psyche is revealed in all its tragedy. Both sides are trapped in unconscious patterns they cannot see. The son fights against a mother who, in the form he fights, doesn't truly exist. The mother loves a son who interprets her love as weakness and punishes her for it. This dynamic is often passed down through generations. A son who humiliates his mother may have witnessed his father treating her the same way. He unconsciously replicates patterns internalized in childhood. The humiliation of the woman becomes learned behavior, perceived as normal. At the same time, a mother who allows herself to be humiliated may have experienced a childhood in which self-respect was never nurtured. She passes on to her son what she herself never learned, the art of respecting and protecting oneself. Thus a cycle of emotional destruction perpetuates itself, one that can only be broken through conscious work on unconscious patterns. This requires courage from both sides. The courage to face and integrate one's own shadows. Another crucial factor in this destructive dynamic is what we can call a narcissistic wound. When the son grows up and is confronted with his own shortcomings, the mother becomes a threatening witness to his weaknesses. She has seen him in his most vulnerable moments. She knows his fears, his tears, his childhood dependencies. For a man trying to maintain an image of strength and invulnerability, this kind of witness becomes an unbearable threat. The mother is no longer seen as a loving protector, but as a danger to his fragile self-image. Her very existence reminds him that he was once small, helpless, and needy. Jung would describe this as a conflict between the persona and the shadow. The persona is the mask we show to the world, while the shadow contains everything we reject in ourselves. The mother becomes a living symbol of the shadow because she embodies the memory of the son's vulnerable, dependent side. This narcissistic dynamic is further intensified by cultural factors. In our society, men are expected to be independent, strong, and emotionally closed off. A man who openly speaks about his love for his mother, or who appreciates her care, is often seen as unmanly. These societal expectations force many men to deny their natural emotional bonds. The humiliation of the mother then becomes a perverted form of self-assertion. The son believes he can only prove his masculinity by devaluing feminine care. He confuses cruelty with strength, indifference with autonomy. This confusion becomes especially evident in moments when the mother needs emotional support, when she becomes ill, grows old, or asks for help. The son often responds with rejection or even contempt. Her weakness confronts him with his own mortality, his own vulnerability. Instead of accepting this reality, he projects his fear onto her and blames her for his own anxieties. Freud taught us that we often hate what we most fear. The son who humiliates his aging mother may be fighting his own fear of aging, dependence, and death. The mother becomes a scapegoat for existential fears he cannot cope with. This projection is particularly cruel because it punishes the mother for something she is not responsible for. She is blamed for her own vulnerability, for her natural human needs. The son who never learned to deal with his own weaknesses turns the mother into the embodiment of everything he rejects about the human condition. Jung recognized that the integration of the shadow is an essential part of psychological development. The son who humiliates his mother has never completed this integration. Instead, he has projected his shadow onto her and fights it where he believes it is safest. Yet this strategy never leads to real liberation. It only deepens the inner split. The real tragedy lies in the fact that this humiliation often escalates precisely when the mother most needs love and support. The son who attacks his mother in her vulnerability robs himself of the opportunity to develop genuine maturity and compassion. He remains stuck in an adolescent stage of emotional development in which weakness can only be handled through aggression. Here we also see another dimension of cultural conditioning. In our society, men are often not encouraged to show care or take emotional responsibility. When the aging mother needs support, many sons feel overwhelmed and respond with rejection. They have never learned how to offer loving support because this role has traditionally been assigned to women. The humiliation then becomes a defense mechanism against this sense of overwhelm. Instead of learning how to care, the son blames the mother for needing care in the first place. He punishes her for her neediness instead of recognizing and developing his own capacity to nurture. This dynamic is further intensified by modern living conditions. Many sons live far away from their mothers, with their own professional and family obligations. Physical distance often becomes emotional distance, and the mother becomes an abstract figure onto whom frustrations and unconscious conflicts can be projected. Technology, which should foster connection, often becomes a tool for humiliation. Messages go unanswered, calls are ignored, Visits are postponed or avoided altogether. This passive aggression is often even more cruel than open confrontation, as it leaves the mother in a state of uncertainty and silent suffering. Jung taught us that behind every strong emotional reaction lies an unconscious complex. The son who reacts so violently toward his mother may be struggling with a mother complex that has shaped his entire personality development. This complex can involve both excessive dependence and excessive resistance. Some sons are so deeply entangled with their mother that they have never fully developed their own identity. They still exist in a symbiotic relationship that threatens their autonomy. Humiliation then becomes a desperate attempt to free themselves from this psychological entanglement, but instead of healthy separation, they choose the path of destruction. Other sons, by contrast, have developed an excessive aversion to anything maternal. They fear any form of emotional closeness because they equate it with a loss of autonomy. The mother becomes a threat to their hard-won independence, and they respond with preemptive aggression. Both extremes show that the relationship with the mother never found a healthy balance. The son never learned how to be both connected and autonomous at the same time. He swings between total enmeshment and total rejection, never finding the middle path of mature love. The mother in this dynamic is often a tragic figure, caught between her own emotional neediness and the desire for connection with her son. She may have built her entire identity around the role of being a mother, and cannot let go without feeling as though she is losing her entire reason for existence. At the same time, she often unconsciously contributes to the continuation of the destructive pattern. Her inability to set boundaries, her willingness to endure humiliation, sends the son the message that his cruelty is acceptable. She becomes codependent in a system that harms both sides. Jung recognized that true healing is only possible through the integration of the shadow and the awareness of unconscious patterns. For the son, this means facing his own weaknesses and fears instead of projecting them onto his mother. He must learn that true strength lies not in humiliating others, but in the ability to deal with his own vulnerabilities. For the mother, it means developing her identity beyond the role of the mother and learning to respect and protect herself. She must understand that true love sometimes means setting clear boundaries and refusing to tolerate destructive behavior. The bitter truth is that healing is often only possible when both sides are willing to face the painful truths about themselves. The son must accept that his cruelty is a sign of his own inner weakness. The mother must acknowledge that her self-sacrificing tendencies may be standing in the way of true love. This realization is painful, but it is the first step toward liberation. If both are willing to see through their unconscious patterns, a new form of relationship can emerge, one based on mutual respect and genuine autonomy, rather than entanglement and projection. Carl Jung taught us that the greatest treasures often lie hidden in the darkest corners of our psyche. The destructive dynamic between mother and son also contains the potential for deep healing and transformation. If the son learns to integrate his shadow, he can become a man who is both strong and compassionate. If the mother learns to honor herself, she can become a woman who loves without sacrificing herself. The humiliation that now seems like an insurmountable chasm between them can become the starting point for conscious and mature love. But this requires courage, honesty, and the willingness to explore one's deepest fears and desires. In the end, the question is not why a son humiliates his mother, but how both can find their way out of the shadow. The answer lies not in blame or justification, but in the courageous willingness to recognize and transform one's unconscious patterns. If you see yourself in these words, whether as a mother or as a son, know that change is possible. The first step is always awareness. The awareness that behind every act of cruelty lies a wounded soul seeking healing. Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." The irritating, painful aspects of our most important relationships are often the gateways to our deepest growth. The mother relationship, with all its shadows and complexities, remains one of the most powerful arenas for psychological transformation. It reflects not only personal dramas but also the great themes of human existence: love and hate, dependence and autonomy, life and death. If you feel that these words touch a truth within you, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us about your own experiences with these complex family dynamics. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more in-depth analyses of the human psyche, because only by understanding our darkest impulses can we find our brightest light.